I went undercover last year. They admit to knowingly profiting off of abuse material, underage content, rape content, non-consensual content.
That was Arden Young, an undercover investigative journalist from Sound Investigations.
Fundamentally, the internet is a city without walls. And by virtue of that, many, many children, the vast majority, it's almost universal at this point.
And Benjamin Nolot, CEO and founder of Exodus Cry, a nonprofit that fights sex trafficking and all forms of commercial sexual exploitation. Do you think that these Pornhub execs should be in prison?
Absolutely.
Pornography has annihilated a generation of men. We're talking about fundamentally the protection of children.
Can we clarify this a little bit? Because that sounds so extreme.
Straight sex, vaginal sex, is now referred by the adult industry as vanilla.
Graphic, hardcore, oftentimes violent content that is deeply transforming our sexual DNA.
So how many people are looking at porn? What's the exposure for children and then adults, men and women?
We know conservatively now that
in this conversation, they expose the heart of today's destructive porn industry. For those who are listening who are addicted to porn, what do you recommend they do to become free?
The image of this man in my mind's eye turned from being a middle-aged man to an 11-year-old boy. And I just remember just weeping in prayer. For so many men who were participating in this were themselves children, and their lives were hijacked.
While I hope you choose to listen to this important conversation, I do need to tell you to please consider your mental state before consuming. Can you explain this age ID loophole?
Their content moderators are trying to match a face on an ID to someone's naked body. It's pretty much impossible.
Arden's undercover work exposes Pornhub executives admitting that they knowingly profit off the sexual exploitation of minors.
We're not living in the 1950s. This isn't a magazine issue anymore.
Benjamin is committed to shifting cultural mindsets and laws that protect children from porn exposure. He has been a featured speaker at the United Nations and is an award-winning filmmaker. His book, Raised on Porn, is a must-read.
There are so many scenarios where it's just undeniably about the subjugation and humiliation of women. The cover narrative of the pro-sex work movement would say, oh, this is what these women really want. Like, this is very sexually liberating for them.
What can parents do to prevent their kids from accessing such detrimental content?
I've spoken with so many parents, and they all tell me things went downhill.
I encourage you to listen to the entire conversation. It will blow you away. Arden, Benji, thank you so much for being here. I want to jump right in and talk about how normal porn is in our culture. People hide it. They don't talk about it, but it's normalized in everywhere that you see, even on sitcoms or even like sex therapists on podcasts will talk about it so casually. Like it's this beneficial, even like healthy thing in relationships. So can you guys I'll maybe start with you, Benji, dispelling kind of the gray area of porn and if there's any benefits to it or if it's all negative, what are your thoughts on it?
My head is already spinning in many directions right now, just based on that, because it's true. We do live in what I would describe as a porn culture. And having spent a lot of time investigating and researching that subject matter, in particular because of my work fighting sex trafficking, that has like kind of like a very technical application to me. I would describe a porn culture as a culture that tells certain stories about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, and what it means to be a sexual being. And just to say it succinctly, a porn culture is a culture that casts women as sexual objects, that casts men as sexual predators, and that casts sex as a meaningless recreational act or as a vehicle for the subjugation, humiliation, and abuse of another. And so I think that, and maybe at some point we can get into the history of this, but I think that we are very much today living in a porn culture, and that has all kinds of negative implications for the way in which we are socialized growing up in this culture and the way in which we internalize those stories in the construction of our identity, worldview, and values. So just as context, I wanted to say that. And then remind me your question, your actual question again.
Like just the gray area of porn.
The gray area. Okay. So yeah, so there you have kind of, these two camps right now where people who would describe themselves as like sex positive, and then you have like a more radical feminist critique of like those who would describe themselves as being sex positive, which is a more kind of like systems level analysis that challenge the position of what being sex positive means. For me, like, when the subject of porn comes up, these people come out of the woodwork who would describe themselves as being sex positive or pro porn. And to your point, would talk about, what they perceive to be the innocuous aspects. Maybe some people would say they live in that gray area. Well, if it's all consenting adults and, what's the problem? Sex is just awesome. And like all that kind of language. And so I'm not even going to address like that side of things to answer this particular question. People have a right to their view, their beliefs, their values, their ethos around sex. That's fine. What we're really talking about when we talk about the subject of porn and its place in our society today is we're talking about fundamentally the protection of children. And what I mean by that is currently the distribution vehicle for pornography is online. We're not living in the 1950s. This isn't, a magazine issue anymore. It is very much an issue of things that are found online. Well, in the construction and the foundation of the internet, no protections were put in place to protect children from exposure to certain things that could be harmful to them. So fundamentally, the internet is a city without walls. And by virtue of that, children are, we know they're online. More and more and more, our lives are being lived online, and many, many children, the vast majority, it's almost universal at this point, of children growing up will have exposure to this graphic, hardcore, oftentimes violent content that some people literally refer to as adult content. So we know this is not made for children, right? And now we know, based on all the research that's out there, how harmful and damaging it is to children and the developmental arrest that's occurring as a result of exposure to that. So if you're putting this out there and you're just sanitizing it with this broad sweeping brush of, well, it's just all, we're all sexual beings and isn't that so great? And like, yeah, sex is great in the right context, but the way that it's being created in a context of porn, and then specifically the inability currently to protect children from it, creates a different issue. So that's point one. Point two, and I'll try to speed this up a little bit. Point two is that it's not just an issue that there are no protections for children being exposed to this content, right? So in order to make porn and put it online, you have to, in your conscience, be okay with, I'm going to put this out there knowing that there are no protections for children. You have to put it out there knowing that children are going to have inadvertent exposure to this and it's going to damage their life. It is going to cause developmental arrest. It is going to sabotage their sexuality. It's going to potentially hijack their entire life. So that's one thing. The other thing is there is currently no way to effectively verify or moderate the performers who are being included in these videos. And what we have seen now through the Trafficking Hub campaign and a lot of things coming up in the culture right now that is shed light on this issue, that there are so many videos that proliferate these pornography sites with minors. They are underage children who are being exploited in these videos. And the way these porn sites are set up make it very, very difficult to get those videos removed. And then once they're removed, they get repopulated right away. And so the work that, was accomplished through the Trafficking Hub campaign really shed light on the lack of an effective moderation system to verify the age and consent of performers in videos. So these large pornography tube sites now are infested with videos of real trafficking, abuse, exploitation of minors, et cetera, et cetera. So when we talk about the gray area, my basic position is you can't even have a conversation about being pro-porn or a gray area or the value of porn or the ethics behind a sex-positive, approach to porn until you can actually guarantee no children are being used in these videos, i.e. there's no statutory rape or trafficking of minors. And you have to, and until there are protections, walls in place on the internet to prevent children from having exposure to this content. Until those two things happen, there's no conversation to be had unless you're just a sociopath. And that is where a lot of these people are at. There's such this obsession with this self-indulgent, self-gratifying, careless and carefree and delusional exaltation of one's sexuality that completely blinds itself from the realities of the harm that is being invoked on real children every single day. All children.
Wow, that was like the best monologue I think I've heard in a long time. Like just one simple question. You didn't even, like you said, cover the downsides, the negative effects to adults looking at porn and how it damages their relationships, damages the way they look at other women and everyone in their lives, how it affects like addiction and their own sex lives, let alone all these things you just touched on. There's so many aspects to this conversation. And like you said, like that is the most important number one thing to be covering first.
There's layers and layers.
So how many people are looking at porn? Children, like what's the exposure for children and then adults, men and women?
You want to tackle that? Or you want?
You start.
Okay. The statistics of people who are watching it.
Yeah. How common is it? How normal is it?
Well, we know conservatively now that the vast majority of children, 90+% have exposure to pornography by the time that they're 13 years old. We know that the average age of first exposure to porn is around 11 years old. And we know that there are many, many, many children who are discovering porn much before that. Very young ages. And I recently was working on a docuseries, which will come out later this year in 2024. And I was struck by the amount of porn performers that we interviewed whose journey in this world started through childhood exposure, and then in a way became this self-fulfilling fantasy. So these performers would talk about how they were exposed to porn at 4 years old, 7 years old, these like really young ages. And then so we went to find like archival photos of them at that age. And it was just jarring to see these pictures of them as these innocent little children, knowing that they were being exposed to this content and developing porn addictions at these like very, very young ages. And then that was like shaping, their sexual trajectory in life. And so, so I think that the way that, the general public should understand this issue is just to assume that the vast majority of children are having exposure to pornography. And whether it be, some people may say out there, well, we have filters on, at our home and those kind of things. And yet these children then go to school. They then go to a parent's house. They then, and so it's almost impossible to completely protect them from the kinds of images that are just going out into the world totally unfettered.
Yeah, and we're seeing that in a new study out of the UK that recently came out, that most of the sexual violent crime perpetrated against children is actually perpetrated by other children, and it's being attributed to online pornography.
Which makes complete sense because
Yeah.
their brains are underdeveloped and they're actively being shaped by whatever they see in their life. And like you said, this is not just some image that you're seeing that, back when I grew up, boys most specifically, but girls too, like you would have to seek out like images, dial up internet, and then you get a picture, right? This is violent, aggressive,
Yes.
very disturbing video content of sex.
Yes, it's gotten worse. But even, back when the internet was first starting to be used, Carnegie Mellon did a study about online pornography, and they were looking at what pornographic files were actually being downloaded by internet users. And they found that the vast, vast, vast majority of internet porn depicted very, very deviant sexual acts like bestiality, child sexual abuse. And they actually found that like less than 5% of what was being downloaded depicted vaginal sex.
Wow.
So I think the added element of viewing pornography on the internet, the entire experience is completely privatized. There's no longer any shame of having to walk your video up to the cashier at the video store and show your ID and pay for it.
Right.
It's anyone can view anything now without any shame. So I think it's completely changed our culture, completely.
And to Arden's point, I think it's important for people to have a basic framework to understand porn's relationship to sexuality on a cultural level. And specifically, what she was saying about the acceleration of the types of deviancy that we're now seeing normalized through pornography. When Hugh Hefner launched Playboy magazine in 1953, pornography, though it existed on kind of the margins of society, it was not something that was like widely accepted. And he really is the one who was responsible for taking, Hugh Hefner is really the one who was responsible for taking pornography from the back street to the main street, as Gil Dines would put it, who mainstreamed pornography. And what we saw as a result of that was this evolution in human sexuality. I would say, the first of two major evolutions of human sexuality in modern times. Another underlying factor to that was the work of Alfred Kinsey, the pseudoscientific research that he did for a book called Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, that was the predecessor to the launch of Playboy magazine. And the two together, what it did is it caused this evolution in human sexuality. By 1967, in the Summer of Love, they referred to this as, the sexual revolution. The casting off of all restraint, but it was really going from a more traditional notion of sexuality, monogamy really, and viewing sexuality as something that occurs within the safety and commitment of a relationship primarily, and it transitioned into or evolved into sex being treated in this more objectified way. And so that was like a huge evolution in human sexuality.
Not only that, but Kinsey set out to prove that babies were born sexual. And if you look at his experiments, which I might even get emotional at how sick they were.
Yeah,
he
heard of it.
Experimented on newborns all the way up to teenagers and documented orgasms in babies, newborns, all the way up in age increments to teenagers. And this is the kind of person that these people who claim sexual freedom and sexual liberty and porn is good, I mean, that's who they look to for inspiration, which is so sick. Even without them knowing, they look to him for inspiration, right? Because he's inspired Playboy. He's inspired so many things culturally.
It's rotten at the core. And what we saw is a move and an evolution from what I would describe as a relational sexuality to an object sexuality. A relational sexuality is more based in empathy and mutuality. An object sexuality is more based in lust and self-gratification. So it's what can I take from you to satisfy myself. And there's a lot more to say about that. But there's a third category of sexuality, what I would describe as a malevolent sexuality. And a malevolent sexuality is driven more by the sadistic need to harm another person or extract innocence from another person in the context of a sexual scenario. And that is the most disturbing trend I think that we're seeing in modern times since the inception of the internet. So Hugh Hefner, Playboy comes out, our human sexuality on a very macro cultural level moves from a relational sexuality into an object sexuality. The internet comes along and we move from an object sexuality to a malevolent sexuality, where now people who are describing, so oftentimes their first sexual experience involving anal sex, choking, sometimes group sex. It's their first sexual experience. Where is this coming from? Why have things changed so radically? And I believe that there's a direct correlation to the kinds of images that are now being pumped into the culture and creating the images of sexual representation that young people are socialized by and learn about sex through growing up. There's not a healthy conversation about sex in the culture, and in the absence of that, porn has filled that void. Human sexuality is powerful. Mankind is weak. This is a visceral, potent, visual substance that is deeply transforming our sexual DNA, our sexual appetites, and has moved humanity from an object sexuality to a malevolent sexuality. And we can talk more about that if you want, but I wanted to just give a little bit of that framework and that context for what Arden was talking about, because some people will hear that and say, bestiality, like who's interested in that?
I was just going to ask that. I'm like, can we clarify this a little bit? Because that sounds so extreme that only 5, is that just one tiny study that we're seeing? Like I'm picturing a lot of moms listening to this thinking maybe not realizing, okay, I need to care more. I need to spend more time and energy on this to make sure my kids are not accessing porn. But no way is only 5% of the porn kids see or adults see even vaginal sex. But is that really what you're saying?
Yeah, I do. I don't know, obviously, the exact numbers we're looking at across the entire internet. But straight sex, vaginal sex, is now referred by the adult industry as vanilla.
Before I took the clarity and gratitude breathwork class on the Open app the other day, I was feeling out of sorts and a bit chaotic. And after the class, I felt so zen, and taking on my day as a mother of 5 just felt so much easier. It takes a lot of intentionality to maintain a calm energy and stable, healthy presence in my life, raising a large family. Your nervous system plays a role in every aspect of your health and well-being, and breathwork and meditation can help keep you calm and take parenting to a whole new level. These days, I'm committing myself to resetting my nervous system with the Open app when I'm feeling overwhelmed. I feel so much calmer and brought back into my body when I take their breathwork class, and I'm making time for it during quiet time, before the kids wake up, or at night after they're asleep. You can regulate and rewire your nervous system to change your life with science-based daily practices. If you want to get on my daily routine, you can get 30 days free of Open by visiting withopen.com/Ellen. Again, that's 30 days free by visiting withopen.com/Ellen.
I went undercover and recorded multiple PornHub employees talking about their practices.
Yes. And let's get into that. I definitely
one of the writers he writes the pornographic material, he actually said that they'll purposefully market LGBTQ trans content to historically straight viewers, and they track the viewers through cookies. They track people very closely. They know their age, where they are, what they're looking at, even what they're doing on other websites. So he says they target these stray viewers with trans content in order to, quote, convert them for profit reasons. But I think there's also a social motivation as well. And yeah, that's what they're doing. They encourage children to watch their content. They purposefully cater ads to appeal to children as well as pedophiles. They purposefully depict people who appear to be 15. They appear to be minors having a sexual encounter with someone who's definitely well into adulthood. And so this is a type of content that's trending now. It's just a fact. Incest is one of the most popular categories now we see on the homepages of the most popular pornography websites. Of course, we know that lesbian sex is probably the most watched category across all websites. The teen category is among the most popular now as well. And he also tells me that for their most popular trans website, it's called Trans Angels, the main buyers for that website is actually straight guys, because they're purposefully depicting female presenting performers in this content who, many times are convincingly female looking, having sexual encounters with each other. So in a straight male's mind, it's kind of tricking him into thinking he's watching a lesbian scene. In reality, technically he's watching two males. So it was shocking to me to hear him disclose that, yeah, our main audience for our trans content is actually straight males.
And I cut you off earlier, which I think you were going in this direction of, and I want to get more into like your experience undercover with Pornhub, but let's like wrap this little part up that you were explaining before I cut you off. I'm sorry, about bestiality. And is it because it's just the way that the mind works of like, what's the next hit, the next most extreme thing I can get to, because this is no longer like, it's a little numbing, is that where you were going?
Yeah. So, with addiction-based impulses and compulsions, it works different for something like pornography than it does for, say, something like, drug addiction. With drug addiction, you need more. With sex addiction, you need different. And so sex is more novelty based. And so if somebody, watches, let's say, what, as Arden put it, as what somebody would describe as like vanilla sex, and, whether they watch that for an hour or 20 hours is not increasing the high, right? And so the idea is different. The idea is, well, initially I got a dopamine rush looking at that vanilla sex, but now that I've done that 300 times, it's beginning to dissipate. And so let me see if there's somebody who is from, Brazil or Southeast Asia or, some other group that is different. And then that evolves into, it just progresses from there. And so I think that is based on the novelty aspect of our sexuality, is driving people into things that they would self-describe as never having been interested in. And it's a very sobering point. I remember sitting down interviewing a man who had gotten addicted to porn, and his path took him down this very, very dark, sinister hole into consuming child porn. And then through file sharing and so on and so forth, had amassed this large amount of child pornography, was eventually raided, eventually went and served prison time for that. But I asked him, I was like, would you have described yourself as like a pathological pedophile prior to this porn addiction? He's like, no, not at all. I was attracted to women. And then described the slippery slope of going younger and younger and younger. And for him and for a lot of people, it's somehow about trying to extract innocence through a sexual experience that becomes this heady cocktail for them, and it becomes intoxicating to them, and they need more and more and more of it. And so what was so alarming about that to me is that this person described the fundamental altering of their sexual DNA, their sexual appetites, as a result of getting online and pushing that button one time. So the point being, and he's not the only one who's explained this to me, or that, it can go into many other things. People have described themselves as being completely straight and then having same-sex attraction. And there's so many variations of this. But the point being is that for people who are getting online, for people who are, getting on that website, whether it be through their phone, whether it be through, some sort of device, end up in a situation where they are opening up their sexual spirit to what it is they're being subjected to, and may lead them in some way that they did not sign up for. And the last place that we want to be taken for a ride is with our sexuality. It is such a sensitive, fragile part of ourself, and so deeply and intimately connected to our own view of ourself, to our identity, that when that part of us becomes fractured, when that part of us becomes violated in some way, it has deeply, deeply damaging effects on our mental health, on our psyche, on our ability to have healthy relationships, on the way we look at other children. I mean, I've had people lament to me that they had an addiction to child porn and then would see their baby. I mean, this is really hard stuff to talk about, in a certain position, laying there, and couldn't, I can't, I just imagine being in that headspace. So all that to say that, like, the alarming, sobering aspect that for me is, and, for people who may be watching or listening to this, is like, really think about whether you want to push that button, because this may take you somewhere that you never signed up for, and it absolutely has the capacity and the potential to destroy your life. I mean, it destroyed this man's life. He was a fireman, fired from his job, in prison, like. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Like, the people who are out buying children, flying across the world to buy children for sex, the people who are, seeking out abusive sexual encounters, raping others, like, those people didn't just wake up one day and decide, I'm going to go prey upon a child, or I'm going to go, rape this woman. Like, that was a journey over time. Something was growing inside of them that nobody else could see, that they kept hidden, and that thing took over.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different things that could potentially have started that pot, but porn is definitely not going to help that.
At the very least, it's the fuel on the fire.
And the adult industry likes to argue that porn it can't change your sexuality. It just, it's a healthy outlet for people to explore their sexuality. And it's so provably false. Like, it's actually, you have to laugh or else you'll cry. So one of the founders of PornHub actually got pulled into a congressional hearing years ago. And he said a quote, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, PornHub has done great things for people. People have, gotten interest in new things and gotten to explore things they wouldn't have gotten to otherwise. And so it's one of the founders of PornHub saying that, while they put all of their, like, brand ambassador cronies out there trying to say, like, oh no, you can't change your sexuality. We're just here to, like, help you out and support whatever so you want to watch.
Something and not have to go do
whatever you want to watch. Yeah. So it's so provably false. And I get so many people in my DMs who have struggled with all types of addictions, including starting out watching, vanilla porn, and then gradually gaining an appetite for just more and more violent porn. And one person even admitted to me that he started to seriously fantasize about murdering a woman. He went from seeking out pornography, just, regular true consenting adult pornography, like people would say, and 2 years later, actually wanting to murder a woman. And since he's recovered from that, thank God. But he's openly admitting this, which is
it's the natural outcome and evolution of that journey into a malevolent sexuality. Because if you think about it, at its very core, what is this sort of the spirit behind the pornography that is being produced and mass marketed out there? Well, some of the most common things are very subjugating and humiliating to women and meant to be that. And so the idea of a woman on her knees with multiple men ejaculating on her face. I don't mean to get too graphic in this podcast, but there are so many scenarios where it's just undeniably about the subjugation and humiliation of women. So the cover narrative of the pro-sex work movement and the sex positive movement would say, oh, this is what these women really want. Like, this is very sexually liberating for them to be called a cum dumpster, a bitch, a whore, a hoe, have her head flushed down the toilet and multiple men ejaculate on her face, or whatever this, just on and on and on. Yeah. There's just so much stuff like that. That's what they want. And this is sexually liberating. But the deeper truth is that this is not about sexual liberation. This is about hatred of women, deep-seated, ancient hatred of women who wants them controlled, dominated, subjugated, and punished, and then blamed for it.
And this, it's so horrible. And you picture adults saying this, but just young people, young kids accessing this and seeing this is devastating.
These are things that you can find on the front page of PornHub.
So can you tell me everything? Explain it. Explain everything. You're an undercover investigative journalist.
Yeah, I'm an investigative journalist, and I went undercover last year for several months, and I basically recorded around a dozen PornHub or PornHub parent company employees speaking about illegal and illicit practices behind the scenes, a wide range of admissions, but they admit to knowingly profiting off of abuse material on their site. So that includes child abuse material, all sorts of underage content, rape content, non-consensual content, things like that. And as well as admissions of purposefully advertising to pedophiles and young teens. No roadblocks for children viewing their content, actual encouragement for 12-year-olds to watch pornographic content, trans content in order to explore their sexualities and educate themselves and, quote, find their kink.
How are they encouraging that?
So these are individual employees saying, yeah, porn is a great tool for a 12-year-old to see if they think that they're trans, or a 12-year-old to just find their kink on men.com and things like that. And these are all ALO owned sites. I don't think people understand, ALO is a parent company of PornHub. It used to be called MindGeek, but they've now rebranded to ALO. They own hundreds and hundreds of different pornography websites. They do everything from write to shoot to produce, distribute, advertise the pornography. They do everything in-house. They don't need anyone else. They have competition coming to them for consulting and help and things like that. They have pretty much a monopoly over North American pornography. So when I say PornHub, sometimes I mean just the entire machine of ALO. And yeah, it's a horrendous machine. I mean, it's now owned by a guy who was formerly a really well-known defense attorney for child sex predators.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, he was considered like the best of the best at what he did. And he gave conferences, he spoke at conferences and advised other defense attorneys on how to get lesser sentences for their child sex predator clients. I mean, he's like a horrible guy who now owns this pornography company. Now he's claiming that they're cleaning it up. I mean, his firm is literally called Ethical Capital Partners, which is just insane.
That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get back to the undercover footage. There's all sorts of admissions. We released like 8 different undercover videos talking about how they don't verify the pornographic ads that are on the site. I called in and pretended to be an advertiser, and I said, I have all these, videos of girls. I don't know who they are. I don't know how old they are. Can I still post them? And they're like, yeah, just send them through. Even if we do deem that they're underage, we won't hurt your account. And we also don't report to the police. So,
wow. So I want to watch a video that you've shared, and then I have some more questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
For people who obviously want to see some of your content, they can see it on Sound Investigations, right?
Yeah, soundinvestigations.com.
And on YouTube, correct?
On YouTube, yeah, not on Twitter, unfortunately. Twitter has limited our videos and taken some of them down, and
interesting,
we were demonetized.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a really bad journey with Twitter. I mean, honestly with pretty much every platform, but Twitter surprisingly has kind of been the worst.
I wonder why. You would think that like this information, just them talking about it would be,
yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I'm gonna push play. We'll watch a few minutes and then we can kind of respond, which I'm sure you've seen, but
yeah, it's great.
How are you going to tell me, like, who's in that video of the girl's not showing her face? Like, that wouldn't hold in court. That would be the loophole that I always, like, I look at that and I'm like, that's stupid, but everybody is just kind of rolling with it.
Why don't they just roll with it? Why don't they say something?
It costs money.
Who exploits the loophole?
A lot. Fucking everybody. Everyone. You make a lot of money.
Do rapists use it, or?
Of course. We've brought it up to the CPO, we brought it up to the CLO, and they're both telling us it's all good. And the CPO is especially telling us, like, fuck off, it's all good. Like, stop.
So they know the
like,
risk.
Shut up. They're like, it's all good. I'm not gonna get caught. It's fine.
But what if, like, the government was to find out about this loophole? What would they do?
I don't know. They're not gonna do shit. They'll do nothing. Because they're dumb. They don't know shit. They're not qualified to identify the loophole.
Meet Mike Farley. Farley is a product manager at PornHub who has been working at PornHub for more than 10 years. In fact, Farley tells our undercover reporter he was one of PornHub's first employees.
Do you think anything slips through the cracks?
Of course. 100%.
How?
I don't know, because it's stupid. Because at the end of the day, it's like, how are you gonna tell me, like, who's in that video of the girl's not showing her face? You're like trying to match boobs and birthmarks on their butts and stuff. Like, you're trying to, I know this guy's dick, man. That's definitely this guy. Like,
so someone could still lie and get around it?
Because it's stupid. Because it's like, I could be a content uploader, and the only thing you need from me is, like, you don't need a picture of my dick, you need an ID. Right? You need my driver's license, which has my face on it. It has just my face on it. You don't see my body on it. And now my videos never have my face.
Yeah.
But you have to be like, no, like, that guy's body and his dick matches his face. Like, that's what compliance people are basically saying. But it's like, tried it, like, that wouldn't hold in court, you know what I mean? Like, that's so subjective. It's not factual, it's your opinion. Like, you think that? Okay.
Wow,
you can't really guarantee that. That would be the loophole that I always, like, I look at that and I'm like, that's stupid, but everybody is just kind of rolling with it.
Why don't they just roll with it? Why don't they say something?
It costs money. It would be counterintuitive to the business.
So Can you explain this age ID loophole they're talking about?
Yeah, so relatively recently, I think a couple years ago, Pornhub started requiring uploaders to get their ID verified within Pornhub, within the site, because there were so many non-consensual videos being uploaded, and it got really bad and turned into a PR nightmare for them. So they started requiring the main uploader to upload his or her ID. And what he's saying is that, yeah, I mean, it doesn't really say much, because when you upload your ID accompanied with a pornographic video, there's so many pornographic videos that don't show a face. And so essentially their content moderators are trying to match a face on an ID to someone's naked body, and it's pretty much impossible. So the main person could just upload their ID. It might not even be them. There might be someone else in the video who's underage or not consenting to what's happening in the video, and it just goes through.
Wow. Do you have any comments on that?
I mean, so when we launched this Trafficking Hub campaign back in early 2020, we had no idea how viral this campaign would go. And, but you know, with any kind of viral sensation, it has like a quick rise and then it kind of fizzles out. And yet the work to bring embedded long-term concrete change is going to require a very dug-in effort and a lot of fortitude and a lot of perseverance. And so Arden came into the equation to basically take the initial findings of Trafficking Hub and test those through these undercover investigations, and really helped quantify and verify the veracity of the things that we were saying with this, you know, these videos that are just so compelling, and I think should be a major concern to everybody. And so I'm just we've been deeply inspired by Arden's undercover investigation, and it's highlighting some like really important things regarding the lack of integrity and that these sites are run with.
Yeah, well, likewise, we wouldn't have even known to investigate without Trafficking Hub and all the attention that brought to the issue. So,
Like with Exodus Cry, that's your company.
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't think it wouldn't have even been on our radar to investigate without Exodus Cry and all the work they've done.
So these Pornhub execs, like it's saying in this video, are knowingly allowing rape content to be uploaded to their site,
Yeah.
non-consensual content, underage girls content to be uploaded to their site. So
Yeah, and what Mike is saying in the video is he's actually brought this to the C-suite executives before and said, hey, this is a problem. These things are getting through. And they told him to F off and shut up. And I say, why? And he basically explains to me, because it would cost money to address any of these issues. So
do you think that these Pornhub execs should be in prison?
yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's not a legitimate business. And pretty recently, end of last year, Pornhub admitted to profiting off of sex trafficking in a criminal case out of the Eastern District of New York. For a long time, there was one of their major content partners was called Girls Do Porn, and they were porn producers and put up these pornographic videos. But it was proven that hundreds of these girls were actually trafficked into it. And Pornhub profited off of this. Girls Do Porn profited off of this. So recently they had to admit, like, yes, we profited off of that, and it was sex trafficking. They kind of just got a slap on the wrist as far as consequences go.
Why is that? How is that possible?
I don't know.
Explain that to me, somebody.
I don't know. It's really frustrating. Yeah, basically they got a sweet deal where they're like, we promise to be on our best behavior. And
There's a point where it goes from just, you know, negligence to complicity. And I think that's another thing that Arden's videos help us see, is that there's a measure of complicity here. there's the vast preponderance of stories of people who we have heard that, have been featured in these videos and tried to get them removed, tells a story of a criminal enterprise that is engaged in racketeering, silencing, in some cases, celebrating the exploitation. If you look at some of the tweets that they did about mocking the people whose videos have been found in these sites is horrific.
Oh my gosh.
And they've tried to turn these things, they really wanted a brand that is cool and edgy and porn chic. And so they would take the most egregious things that had occurred on their site and put a twist on it to mock the people who were like, a video had gotten leaked to them. One tweet I remember saying, well, if you don't want a video to get leaked, then don't make a video, duh, something like that. And but some of these people were literal rape victims of child exploitation, things of that nature. And so when you just look at the history and the track record of how Pornhub has managed that aspect of their site, it tells a very disturbing story, and it's nothing short of criminal. You can only say for so long, oh, we didn't know, or oh, how did that get there? Before eventually you have to accept the fact that they are complicit. They are literally placing ads on those videos and then making it very difficult to get them taken down or removed. That's complicity. They are complicit in enabling and profiting from videos of real trafficking, abuse, rape, child sexual exploitation, on and on and on. And, when it comes to our sexuality, it's just crazy how, since the work of Alfred Kinsey that we mentioned earlier, everything gets a pass. It's like this big umbrella sanitizer. Well, racism is awful. That's horrible. Don't ever be a racist person. There's that sentiment in the culture. And then it's unless it's happening in porn. And then there's just rampant racist genre of porn about,
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
There is really horribly racist porn. I've seen, I don't want to get too graphic, but very abusive situations between a white guy abusing, say, a black woman during sex and yelling racial slurs and even physically harming her.
Oh, horrible.
Yeah, and it's considered a kink. It's not considered a crime. Suddenly it's just called a kink, right? And
just label anything a kink and then it's fine. Essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a busy mom of 5, and sometimes I just need 15 minutes to sneak away and create a mini spa experience for myself at home before I tackle the day. And this is when I reach for Osea's dynamic duo, the Salts of the Earth Body Scrub and the Undaria Algae Body Oil. Your ticket literally to silky smooth skin. First, start your self-care ritual with the Salts of the Earth Body Scrub in the shower. It's a luxurious blend of mineral-rich salts and organic seaweed extracts that gently exfoliate, leaving radiant, incredibly smooth skin beneath. Then after the shower, follow up with Osea's Undaria Algae Body Oil, enriched with hydrating botanicals and antioxidants. This lightweight oil absorbs quickly, replenishes my skin with moisture, and leaves it incredibly soft. Elevate your body care game with Osea and indulge in the luxury of clean, ocean-inspired skincare. Click the link in my show notes and use the code Fisher_10 to discover the transformative power of these products. Trust me, your skin will thank you. So are any of your undercover work videos being used in court cases against Pornhub?
Yeah, a couple. So, our videos were cited as evidence in a big class action case out of California, a bunch of trafficking victims, in the Girls Do Porn case, actually. And then there's a relatively new child sex trafficking class action suit against Pornhub out of Alabama that cited our videos as well, and subpoenaed 2 of the employees that I recorded for what they know. So, hopefully we'll be seeing some results soon.
And can you talk about how some of the states in the U.S. now are creating these rules to where, or safeguards essentially, to have to upload your ID to watch anything? Is it only for the Pornhub website or any of the ALO websites?
So it's actually any a dedicated adult website these laws
Okay.
applies to.
And
So,
which states are these?
oh man, there's we're nearing a dozen at this point, but we have Louisiana, Virginia, I want to say North Carolina, Utah, Texas, maybe Arkansas.
Florida, I believe.
Florida just passed one. And these are ID verification laws to be able to access online adult content on these adult websites. And they essentially, the rules kind of vary, but say in Louisiana, it requires that a government ID be submitted to like a third party website and approved before being allowed to enter an adult website and view the content. And so, of course, Pornhub is absolutely just rapidly angry about these laws. They've only complied with Louisiana since that was the first state to pass these laws. And Pornhub actually reported that it drops their traffic to the site by 80% when they
That's
comply with
huge.
these laws.
That's huge, because not only for kids does it obviously deter,
Mm-hmm.
but adults don't necessarily want to upload their ID to show what they're about
Exactly.
to watch. You
Yeah.
know, like having that trail even, and just I bet it deters so much in that aspect, even for adults, but obviously especially for kids.
Exactly. And I guess there is some irony in it because these sites are so closely tracking you anyway.
Yeah.
What is internet privacy anyway these days, really?
Right. I think people just don't realize.
Yeah. And hearing these employees talk behind the scenes, I think one of them said to me, yeah, if cookies get taken away from us, they're tracking tools, then, I don't know how we're going to make money.
Wow.
Type of stuff. So they really rely on these tracking tools to be able to successfully do their jobs there.
And do you feel like this is the best way forward? Is this the best way to safeguard for kids?
Absolutely.
ID, uploading IDs.
I think if I should tell this whole story. So we launched the Trafficking Hub campaign in 2020, and that was led by our then director of abolition, Lila Mickelwaite, who has since gone on to start a organization called the Justice Defense Fund to empower survivors in bringing legal cases against, companies like Pornhub, and serving a very important function for that. In 2021, we started a new campaign. We released a documentary called Raised on Porn, which is about the impact of porn's exposure on childhood consumers. And out of that documentary, we launched a new campaign called Protect Children, Not Porn. The focus of that campaign was these age verification laws, getting age verification laws passed here in the States and abroad as the global standard to protect children online. And what we were told is, due to free speech laws and certain protections, that it would be impossible to pass these laws here in the United States. And then, to our amazement, this past year, Louisiana passed, and then another, and now we're at 12 states that have passed or these age verification laws, and it is changing history. It is going to fundamentally change the experience of children growing up in these environments and their ability to get online and potentially have inadvertent exposure to porn, where that now the protection for them is so much greater. And so this is, I think this is a key battleground, and we've just been deeply encouraged to see the momentum of the Protect Children Not Porn campaign. Many, many people have also partnered in this campaign to help spread awareness, contact their lawmakers, sign the petition, on and on and on. We've done screenings up at Capitol Hill, and we're seeing huge momentum where we are now seeing a conscience about protecting children and in that online space. So that's a really positive development.
And what about for the victims of abuse who their content is being uploaded to porn sites? What is the way forward to protect them? Because like you mentioned, you interview a lot of women who have been exploited, abused, raped, date raped, and then I watched an interview where this woman from your podcast, where this woman had multiple different experiences where she was filmed unknowingly and it was uploaded. And like, I think a lot of people don't understand that when you explained that part about once it's uploaded, it's basically there for life, even if they eventually 7 months later take it down, because that's 7 long months where anybody can screen record it or download it and then upload it later. So it's just on the internet forever. It'll just keep getting uploaded. And this woman that you interviewed, I mean, your podcast is really powerful hearing these stories, just how it completely destroyed her life. So for people who have been sexually abused and exploited, that's that one experience. And then when it's uploaded, it's like a constant reminder, and it's like being abused over and over again because of how many people are watching. So how do we protect those people?
Yeah, that was one of the things that we really considered during kind of the design and formation of the trafficking hub campaign. I remember somebody we were consulting with at the time was the former CEO of Polaris Project, Bradley Miles, and he talked about this idea of the recurring trauma. And it's how awful and traumatic it would be not only to be sexually violated, but to have that recorded, and then for that to be seen by others. But then imagine that the emotional impact of having to go through and find that video, get it removed, then only to find out that it's been uploaded again and again and again. And people are at home masturbating to those images of your sexual abuse. So there are numerous cases underway to bring liability and criminal culpability to the pornographic websites that are enabling these videos and distributing them and profiting from them, and so on and so forth. So that's just another really key battleground in this, is holding these large porn sites accountable for the types of videos that they're distributing and addressing the moderation system through which these videos are able to be put on the website in the first place. You have to have like authentic consent on the part of, and it's just very difficult to attain, I mean, in a best case scenario where somebody's just, let's say, being paid to perform in this video, because then the money in a way is serving as the bribe, right? And it's coercing their consent. And so, consent is already on its own such a low bar. When it comes to sexuality, we really want to talk about mutuality more than consent. And because consent can be bribed, consent can be manipulated, consent, there's so many gray areas that consent operates in.
And sorry to interrupt, but something else I've seen too that you guys talk about is so many accounts of porn stars who are stars going into something expecting it to be one thing, and it ends up being far more violent or graphic than what they were told it would be.
And it's scary. I mean, imagine you technically consent, okay, you're coerced with money to have a sexual encounter on camera with someone, and you're expecting it to be one thing, and then you begin and it gets a little bit too much for you and you try to stop things, but the whole crew is standing around you. The lights are on, the director's there, there's producers, there's makeup people all looking at you, and the director's saying, you said you could do this. You made us a promise. Can you not do this? Everyone's here. You're wasting everyone's time. We're paying everyone. We're on the clock. Get it done. What are you going to do? What are you going to do in that moment? You're going to comply for the most part. Most people, I think, would. I mean, I can't even imagine being in that situation.
Horrible.
The mentality in the creation of a lot of this content is really about pressuring and coercing performers to do things that they don't want to do. And so I asked one prominent performer, he was the winner of the AVN, be like the equivalent to winning the Best Actor award at the Oscars, right? And I was like, so let's say you're there and you're on set, and this girl, she doesn't really want to do whatever it is being asked of her. I said, how do you deal with a situation like that? He said, well, to use my mentor's words, I'll just steamroller over it. he's like, if I'm there to get a scene out of her, if I have to flatter her, I'll flatter her. If I have to strong arm her, I'll strong arm her. That really embodies the consciousness and the mentality of the way that sex is approached in the context of a pornographic scene. So then you have some of the biggest performers like Stoya, for example, who's like a contract star, right? Saying that they had a safe word when she was doing a scene with James Dean, who's like the biggest male performer, not to be confused with the real actor, original actor, James Dean. The porn industry just takes everything and just pollutes it. They have like all these spoof stuff, their names. It's so repulsive to me how anybody can't just see past all that. But anyways, so this person goes by the stage name of James Dean, and she said she was using their safe word, trying to get him to stop. He would not stop. And what she described was a rape encounter. And, those kind of things just get completely swept under the rug. This was, somebody who would have been the Margot Robbie of the porn world, somebody who's a darling of the porn world, a contract star, a true quote unquote porn star in that sense, that's having these experiences. What happens to the person that has no agency at all whatsoever, who's like at the bottom of the totem pole? And, Lana Rhoades, who's another very, very famous porn, quote unquote, porn star, also described doing a scene with this director, this French director, porn director. She had some concerns going into it, said she didn't want to do this, didn't want to do that. And, which in her case was double anal penetration. And then next thing she knows, that's what's being invoked on her in this porn scene. And also just describe this really, really awful experience that now, again, men are going to be at home masturbating to and then blaming her for it. And so it's a very coercive landscape when we talk about the current creation of even mainstream pornography. Like one pornographer said to me, he said, this is how I get them to do what I want to do. I tell them how much they're going to get made ahead of time. And I do that so they spend the money in their head. They know they're going to have to pay their driver. They know they're going to have to pay their agent. I know they're going to go out and they're going to shop in their head. He goes, so by the time that they get there, that money is already spent. He goes, so I get through the first half of the scene, the vanilla scene that I told them they were there in the first place. And then I twist things up to get them what I really want them to do. And now I have the pressure of the whole set there. They've spent the money in their head. They've already done X amount, and now they're not going to get paid if they don't do the rest of it. And then he looked at me and he goes, now tell me, how is that not trafficking? That was straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
A porn director, producer told me this to my face. So the context in which even mainstream porn is being created in is a very coercive landscape, which is one of the characteristics that we legally define trafficking by: force, fraud, or coercion. And so, the total lack of safeguards, accountability, effective moderation, on and on and on, has led to these sites just being completely littered with and infested with videos of real abuse. And it's horrible.
And I've also heard that a lot of men have learned of this information through Fight the New Drug, through Exodus Cry and things like that. And that has like really shut them down from that kind of, like, maybe they're struggling with porn addiction, or they think, oh, I don't really have an addiction. It's just like an on and off use every once in a while. But like learning that information was enough for them to stop completely. Have you heard that a lot?
Yeah, it's great that those stories and those testimonies are out there, that, as this important awareness work is going forth, that it's starting to give people a conscience about, what it is that they are participating in.
Yeah, they start to see the girl in the video as a human being who has a father and has a brother and was a child once. And they realize that no 8-year-old little girl is going, well, when I grow up, how I want to make money is sell my body on camera. No one's saying that. Like, you're not being paid to make someone a cake. You're not a baker. It's different. You're being paid to do something you would never otherwise do.
Yeah.
On camera. Like, it's just,
And I want to go back a little bit to the Pornhub work
Yeah.
that you've done. And also before actually getting to that, what was the first exposing of Pornhub? I think it was, you said Layla Micklethwait is her name, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did she do? And then can you explain some more stuff that you
the
uncovered?
Trafficking Hub campaign was huge and it just raised so much awareness everywhere. There were articles, and I guess namely one, it was a New York Times article called The Children of Pornhub that came out in 2020. And I don't think it would have been written without the Trafficking Hub campaign and all the work that Exodus Cry and Lila did to just raise awareness in general in the media and on social media in the public eye. And the Children of Pornhub article detailed victims' struggles to get their abuse materials taken off of Pornhub. And many of these victims were underage. And many of these victims reported that Pornhub either ignored them or just blatantly refused to take the videos down, and struggled for years. It affected their lives. They struggled with substance abuse, suicide attempts, just horrible things. And reading that article spurred me and my partner, our founder here at Sound Investigations, to want to go undercover to investigate it. And that's why Sound Investigations was formed in the first place. We're like, let's investigate the adult industry.
How did you get into it?
Yeah, so I have a history in undercover journalism. I have been doing it for around 5 years now. And I was at Project Veritas formerly. And I'd always wanted to delve more into the issue of sexual exploitation, especially child sexual exploitation. And so my friend called me up beginning of last year, and said, hey, why don't you read this New York Times article, The Children of Pornhub, and tell me what you think, and if you're okay with just going independent and investigating with me, then let's do it. And I did.
Wow. Is there any other undercover work with exposing Pornhub that you want to share that you haven't shared yet?
Nothing that I can currently share, but hopefully I'll have updates soon because we're not done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to round out this conversation, can we go back to the detrimental effects of kids accessing porn so young? I know you talked amazingly about it in the beginning, but is there more information that parents listening should hear to help them with this? And also just to understand the downsides. What are the downsides of kids 10 years old, 12-year-olds, even 8 years old, accessing this and going deeper and deeper into it, the addictions it causes? What are the detrimental effects long term?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to understand the neurological development of a human being to start with, and how our sexuality interacts with that. And, to the point about sex as something positive, because I would describe myself as sex positive. I think sex is this really beautiful, powerful, mysterious, connecting, unique thing that is deeply pleasurable, and that is, something so important in a relationship.
Meaningful, yeah.
And meaningful. And so sex can be incredible. But I think that the way that our culture has sort of deified sex, it has in one way made sex to be everything, while also at the same time desacralizing it and causing it to mean nothing. And so I think that people in some ways have lost our moral compass. We have lost the capacity to even understand that sex can be something deeply destructive. So it can be both. It can be something that is truly enhancing and connecting, and it can be something that is truly violating and destructive. I mean, that is why rape is deployed during times of war. It is to utterly destroy the enemy psychologically. And to, you could just go down that whole path. So when it comes to a child's development, the question is, when is a child ready for sex? And the answer is not until they're an adult. I mean, to be quite frank, there's emotional development that's happening. We're biopsychosocial beings. There's emotional development that's happening. There's biological development that's happening. And there's neurological development that's happening. And I think that's the one that I want to speak to and that I highlight in my book, Raised on Porn, because our brain is malleable. And when you have these very potent experiences through exposure to pornography that has a biological impact, it's causing feelings of pleasure and arousal, but also a deep knowing that something's not right here. I'm not emotionally ready for this. So it's this cocktail of like shame and pleasure, and then something being triggered in the brain, right? That's sending you back to get that dopamine rush again and again and again and again. So you're actually, so children who grow up with exposure to porn are actually wiring their brain in a certain way to seek out these dopamine hits through this, content, which we've already, described as, oftentimes being very violent, very deviant, so on and so forth. And so when a child grows up to that, the wet concrete of his sexuality is being formed around the kinds of images that he's seen. And I've had men tell me that their first exposure to porn was to this very violent brand of porn, and then later attempted to live that out by raping a woman. Or one guy told me, that he began to fantasize about abducting a child and taking them, somewhere to have sex with them and kill them. Another man talked to me about getting to a point where his thing was wanting to get into the backseat of a girl's car with duct tape and a knife and to abduct a woman. So abduction fantasies, child fantasies, rape fantasies, all going back to their first experiences of sexuality through these novelty narratives that they were seeing in pornography that was coupled with a very powerful biological pleasurable experience. And then again, you throw the shame in there and it creates a cocktail. And it's very objective. It's very difficult to be objective about something that's so intoxicating. Because, when it's that intoxicating, objectivity goes out the window, and and then your baseline is affected, right? So like normal life, your normal emotional state begins to feel boring to you because of these heightened states of arousal that are being invoked through this. So it just, at the end of the day, completely fucked up a child's development, and and it needs to be stopped.
And even like go ahead.
I also want to add, I think a child's exposure to porn is completely inseparable from a child being sexualized. So in a society where we're okay with kids watching porn, where that's normal, we're in a society where people are okay with kids being sexualized. And that's that.
Absolutely. And also children who are watching this kind of porn that you're talking about go into their first sexual encounters. It could be both the boy and the girl. They're pretty young and they're even just being physical, but maybe not even having sex at first, but they're thinking this is what sex is supposed to be like as they go into it based on what they see in porn that's so violent. And so it might not even be as extreme like what you said about wanting to go use duct tape and a knife and kill someone, but it could be their first encounters of sex thinking I thought this is what girls wanted because this is what I'm seeing online. And they're so young and they have no idea how beautiful and sacred sex can be.
Yeah, the images of pornography that are being proliferated online are mostly gonzo, meant to get, instant kind of visceral response. And so sex is not being depicted in the way of this slow, sensual, romantic encounter where there's a warming up period that then produces, increasing levels of intimacy and, so on and so forth. It's just, to your point, it's cutting and pasting the most visceral images possible into these short videos to just get people stimulated right away. And if you're a young child that's grown up on that, and then you get a girlfriend when you're 15 and you're trying to force these things on her,
Yeah.
then her first experience of sex is also going to be extremely distorted. And while in that moment she may experience it as violating and potentially even a sexual assault, could also trip her wires to where then that's what she seeks out later.
Right.
Yeah. And it makes the child more vulnerable to abuse as well, unable to recognize what abuse is.
Yeah.
Because when sex is normalized to a child and, you know, they're watching pornographic images of adults or whatever it is, when some predatory adult approaches them in the future, they're not going to know this is a predator. They're going to see it as, you know, normal, or, you know, even the child might want the sexual encounter, even though this is still an abusive encounter. They might be tricked into thinking this is what I want.
So what can parents do to prevent their kids from accessing such detrimental content? What can they do? What's the best steps forward for that?
Just tell them no. I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And then they'll be no. What do you think, Arden?
Okay. I will preface this by saying I've spoken with so many parents whose children have been subjected to horrible abuse or horrible mental health issues, and they all tell me things went downhill when I got them the smartphone.
Yep. This is like, I could not say this louder.
Yeah.
Like, it's the smartphone, people.
Yeah. That's what I've gathered. I think the smartphone has done so much damage to children. And I will say, even from my own experience, like, I'm a very young person. I'm Gen Z. I grew up with a smartphone when I was a very young teenager.
Really?
And the amount of times like I got in trouble, or I did something I shouldn't have been doing, it was on that phone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
the smartphone does so much damage, and I think people just don't realize what kind of device you're handing a child with a developing brain that has. I mean,
Yes.
I even find it addicting as an adult. We're not talking about porn, but just the phone, the smartphone, the need to have it right next to you all the time, social media and the damage it does. This is even extends even without porn, but the face filters that people use that distorts what we look like, what we think we're supposed to look like, and what we think everyone looks like except for us, because you're seeing this distorted reality of everyone having this airbrushed look. And like, I can't even imagine if I was 14 and looking at that, because, you know, before it was just magazines, and that was even hard.
Yeah.
Where it's like an image of these supermodels, but it felt so like distant, like this was detached from reality. But now on a smartphone, on social media, where everybody is using those kind of face filters and everyone is distorting their body in a certain way to make it seem this is what you're just supposed to look like. So that's just the tiniest little piece of information extended to the unlimited access to the porn.
Yeah.
The
But
internet.
also, I would add, like, in an age appropriate way, tell your child what pornography is and what to look out for, and tell them that whoever is showing it to them, the child needs to come to the parent immediately and let them know, because many times it's another child exposing your kid to pornography, but you don't want an adult to be doing it, especially. That's a really dangerous situation.
Right. I love Chris McKenna with Protect Young Eyes. I had him on my podcast last season, and he has some incredible information on his website to help. It's like delay is the way, and all kinds of different safeguards you can have in your home, like even getting a different router in your home and the different settings you can put on your devices and the way to talk to your kids about porn. He says something that's so controversial, but he says, like, make porn the most normal word in your house. And it sounds, what are you talking about? But I think parents are just so afraid to talk to their kids about it, when really, if you explain it in an age appropriate way, using it in such a safe place so that they can come to you if they ever see, you know, my husband talks to my, you know, kids, and it's very like, if you ever see something that makes you feel uncomfortable, that icky feeling, and that website, Protect Young Eyes, gives you all types of resources on how to talk to your kids about it.
Because like, if you don't talk to your kids about it, someone else is going to. It's just only a matter of time. And it's horrible to say, but like, it wasn't even on a smartphone. I was exposed to porn when I was 8 years old at a friend's house, just on the computer by her older brother.
Wow.
So it had, like, even not in the smartphone era, I think it's very common. I saw it a lot, and boys would talk about it at school a lot, even though.
Right.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time on this point in the second half of my book, Raised on Porn, just really helping to put a guide together for parents of how to work this out with their children. And it's everything that you guys are talking about. There's practical measures that can be put in place, lots of conversations to be had, both, pre-exposure to porn, or if your child has been exposed to porn. Fundamentally, a lot of it has to do with removing shame from the equation. So it's really important to create a shame-free zone in the home where these kinds of conversations are really welcomed as part of the experience of growing up and becoming a human being. There's a lot that we are now challenged with at this present day and time. And the issue of our sexuality is too important to avoid that conversation. And I think it's really helpful for a child to feel safe in their own skin. Like, my parent understands what I'm going through biologically right now, as they go through all of these changes. And and though it may be uncomfortable for a parent at first, you ultimately will gain more respect with your child. Your child will respect you if they see that you're willing to have uncomfortable conversations for the purpose of helping them. And it's not just a shame-based, don't do this or you're bad, but it's hey, these are things that we're going to be exposed to and in our life. And also the human condition, sometimes we try things on and we find that that's not for us. What I try to talk to my kids a lot about is the concept of truth versus deception. And so because we live in such a visual world now and such a visual culture, just having media literacy, like, okay, you see the billboard of that scantily clad woman. What is the story behind that? And really beginning to have those conversations where they get to participate in media literacy. Because at first it's just like, out of the corner of your eye, boobies, like whatever the thing. And like these like feelings come up and it's like, well, let's talk about it. Just let that be what it is. And let's talk about it. That's presenting a very two-dimensional image of who this person is. Were they a child once? Do they have history, preference, meaning, experiences, relationships, family? Like, okay, so let's carve out a more three-dimensional view of seeing that person. So what is the truth about this person? Are they that or are they something else? And those kinds of things can help take the sting that sometimes shame brings. Because a shame-based operating system says, I saw that, now I'm bad for seeing about it. And there's nothing I can do with that. So then there's this emotional decongestion that builds up that ultimately results in a lot of polarization. People becoming hypersexual later or hyposexual, where it's shut down. So in order to be the healthiest version of ourselves, we have to create space to be honest about the journey of growing up, maturing, becoming human, the development of our sexuality, and all the challenges to that in this world that we live in. The reason why Arden and I are so passionate about the subject of porn is because it's this very violent, potent visual substance that is waging war on our humanity. And so we're like, all the growing up stuff, sexuality, all that is normal. This thing is not normal.
Yeah.
This is an invading alien force from another universe that is trying to wipe out humanity. That might sound some extreme to some, but it is absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Raquel Welch said it best. Pornography has annihilated a generation of men.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so true. I think people are just so blind to it. You just don't think very much about it. People just don't think too hard about it, don't want to talk about it. You're like, oh, just put my head in the sand. don't want to think too hard. I was looking for a way to hydrate my skin from within, and I'm so glad I found Peak Tea. I am absolutely obsessed with this morning and afternoon ritual. Peak's Radiant Skin Duo helps hydrate, repair, detoxify, and brighten my skin from within because this is skincare that you drink. I love the Sun Goddess Matcha because it's organic, ceremonial grade matcha, and it contains chlorophyll and antioxidants that help detoxify and brighten my skin. I've been drinking this every single morning and I'm obsessed with it. The BT Fountain is a hydrating and repairing beauty drink that I love to have in the afternoon. It contains electrolytes and minerals like magnesium and potassium that help my body absorb water more effectively, which keeps my skin hydrated and bouncy. Peak's products are quadruple toxin screened for purity and use the highest quality ingredients for effective results. And they dissolve in both hot and cold water. And more importantly, they taste delicious. So you keep coming back every day. For a limited time, get 15% off plus a free rechargeable frother and cup when you shop the link in my show notes. Last question. For those who are listening, adults who are addicted to porn, what do you recommend they do to become free? Who want to become free?
Well, what I do want to say is that I in no way want people to feel shame for being consumers of porn. I don't want to demonize them. I want people to understand that these pornography websites, people who make pornography are very predatory. They prey on your viewership, and not only are trying to cater to what you think you want to see, but what they want you to see, and they're actually trying to shape your sexuality. That's very predatory behavior. And for someone trying to overcome a pornography addiction, I would say that there's so many good resources, like, Covenant Eyes is one. There's, I'm sure Benji probably knows more than I do about this, but I just want to encourage you. I get DMs all the time from people who are recovering in different stages of recovery. It can happen. Great people, not trying to demonize anyone for struggling with an addiction.
Yeah, sometimes the inadvertent consequence of having conversations like this is that if somebody is in a shame-based operating system, they can hear us speaking passionately about these issues and internalize it in the way of thinking, oh man, I am a worm. And so we're trying to provide a systems level analysis of pornography at a macro level. When it comes down to the individual user, I know this is true for Lila, it's true for Arden, myself, like our team at Execs Cry. We have a very realistic, compassionate view of the individual person. I know for myself, like I started off in this by fighting trafficking, human trafficking and child trafficking. And I used to have a very I really thought about men with a serious edge because I saw that they were the ones who were fueling this through demand. And I remember being in prayer one day and I was praying these like really precatory prayers of like, stop these men, kind of thing. And I had just in my head, in my mind's eye, the picture of a man, like a middle-aged man. And I remember the image of this man in my mind's eye turned from being a middle-aged man to an 11-year-old boy, like a young boy. And I just remember just weeping in prayer that this judgment I was harboring for so many men who were participating in this were themselves children who were exposed and violated and their lives were hijacked. So it's really important when Arden says, it talks about shame, that we have compassion on humanity right now at this moment of history. We are living in a corporately sexually traumatized planet. We have all been affected by it. So the question is, what are we going to do to get help for ourselves, to help our communities, to put an end to this? This is something else I talk about in the second half of my book, is what men can do to get free. I've worked with men who said nothing else worked. After the work with you, I am free for the first time in my life.
That's amazing.
So I'm relentlessly optimistic for men. I have hope for pornography users. I believe that the tools are out there to get free. It would probably be another podcast to get into that. But you can get my book, shameless plug.
Yes,
and
of
I'm
course.
sure
Please
many
do.
other resources available out there.
Raised on porn. Right?
Raised on porn, yeah. So
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for being here. It's such a heavy topic, and I really appreciate all you shared. It's so important. And I'm just so grateful for your time.
we're grateful
Thank
to
you
be
for
here.
having us.
Of course. All right, we'll end it here.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
bye everyone.